A prenup is a prenuptial agreement. So it's an agreement that you and your soon-to-be spouse signed before you get married, and it lays out how you're going to handle things if you get divorced. It only handles division of assets and liability or the creation of community property. It can never deal with kid issues, but it really is a great way to lay out your financial situation before you get married with a plan for if you get divorced in the future, how things are going to get divided at the end. The benefit of having a prenup is that if you get divorced, everything is already laid out. You had a plan. This is what's going to happen at the end. There's not any room then for negotiation or need for negotiation. It takes out a lot of the fight that would be there if you didn't have a prenup to begin with, because you already planned it out. One of the things that I really like prenups for is planning for spousal maintenance if a marriage ends. So many people get married, they're in love, they have kids. One parent stays home because everybody agrees that's in the kids' best interest. We want the kids to be home with one parent, and often that means that that parent has given up some education, gives up the ability to earn their own living. And if they get divorced 20, 30 years down the road, it is now really, really difficult for that person, if not impossible, to get a job or to get a job that is going to support themselves in how they need to be supported at that stage of their life. So if you're going to agree that we want one spouse to stay home for the benefit of the children, then it seems reasonable to say, well, if I do this, if I give up my education, if I give up the ability to get a job and build an income stream over my lifetime, then I need to be protected in the end. And here's how we're going to handle spousal maintenance so that I am not left hanging if we get divorced years down the road. Other good reasons to get a prenuptial agreement include things like if you had an inheritance or you had significant separate property before you got married. Now, those things will always be separate, but if you put that in a prenup and make it very clear what your separate property was, then it's easier to prove that down the road. If you do get divorced, it's much less, it's much more difficult for your ex to contest it. If you've already documented it in a prenup, it just makes everything very clear. As a business owner, if you had a business before divorce, you may want to have a prenup to document the fact that you had that business and what you put into it, what the assets were, what the liabilities were at the time that you got married. Many times over the length of a marriage, the details can get forgotten. It's much more difficult to go back and find documents to prove, hey, this was my separate property. And if you have that documented in a prenup, it's very clear that that business was your business and somebody can't contest that when it's time to get divorced. If you decide that getting a prenup before getting married is right for you, you want to talk to a qualified family law attorney who can walk you through the process of making sure that any prenup you sign is enforceable. Why go to all that trouble if it's not going to help you in the end? You want to have someone that knows that you have to identify all of the assets that you have at the time of your marriage so that we know what is separate property and can document that. You want to make sure that they have looked at and talked about how are we going to create community property if we're going to create community property. What's community? What's separate? What is the income from our jobs going to be? Is that going to be community or separate? And if you just go online and pick up a document off the internet, you're not going to know what is the right way to do this. You're not going to know that you have to disclose all of this information for it to be effective. The other thing that you want to do to make it super airtight is once you're married, you go back and sign another document confirming that that prenup is what you agreed to and that you still believe that it's right and fair. So that makes it extra enforceable. Some people will even say that you should file something called a declaratory judgment and get a judge to sign off on it saying, yes, that was an enforceable agreement. So if we have any disputes in the future, this is solid. Prenuptial agreements can be challenged. Some of the things that can be challenged are, did the person have capacity? Did they know what they were signing when they signed that agreement? If you knew what you were signing, even if you didn't necessarily understand it, you're probably going to be out of luck if you try to challenge it. One of the best ways to challenge a prenuptial agreement is to look at what was disclosed and what wasn't disclosed. The idea of a prenup is that you are going to each disclose all of your assets and liabilities so that you are making a fair and honest decision about whether this is right for you. If all of the assets and liabilities were not disclosed and some were withheld, some were hidden, now you may have an avenue for challenging that prenup down the road because you didn't have full and fair disclosure. A lot of people want to put as a ground for divorce in their prenup the ground of adultery. And if that other person has cheated, that means I get more than what I would get if we just divorced if there was no adultery. That is a really hard thing to prove in a court. So be very careful if you are adding into your prenup a trigger for adultery, because it is very hard to prove down the road.